Welcome to Wholehearted Healing with Jo, the podcast where we dive deep into the journey of healing body, mind, and soul. I'm Jo, a manual osteopath and holistic health coach, here to help women like you reconnect with your authentic self, release what no longer serves you, and step into your highest potential. Together we'll explore empowering tools, have soulful conversations, and transformative practices to guide you toward wholehearted living. Whether it's emotional healing, physical alignment, or finding balance in your life, this is your space to grow, heal, and thrive. So take a deep breath, settle in, and let's begin this beautiful journey together. Welcome back to another episode. Today we're talking all about burnout and how we can create a more balanced life. I myself have dealt with this. I don't know if any of you have ever felt just so tired, so exhausted that even if you had all the time off or had all the sleep, you still just never feel recharged. There's just something that's just dragging you down. And this can make us feel like we're just running on nothing, like we got no more gas in the tank. And it really makes us feel this depletion and almost feel like something's missing, but at the same time, we're so busy, we're so overwhelmed, and we're so consumed with life, right? We feel very the demands of life are just crazy and big, and they're just a lot. And so the impact of burnout is huge. I've experienced this in my life. I have had people who I know in my life where I see that this is what they're dealing with, and it's a big block to how they just feel. If they could learn and were open to learning how to manage these types of feelings and what's coming up for them, oh my gosh, their life would change, right? And I see this with clients, and especially again with women, and I treat a multitude of people in my clinic of just male, female, all that kind of stuff, different ages, ranges, all that kind of stuff. But women especially, I think, because we have so many roles that we play in life, not that men don't, but it's just, I think, men and women process things very differently. And I think it's such a huge piece. And so burnout for me, what I have noticed in my own life, it's greatly affected my quality of life when it's showing up for me. But it also is a big sign that, things just aren't balanced. Things aren't in alignment for me, and something's got to give, right? Something needs to change, and I'm the only one who can change that. So our burnout and our state of burnout can very heavily influence our mental, spiritual, physical, emotional spaces of our health and our well-being. So it's huge because it does impact all of us. And I find if it's influencing one area, it starts to trickle into all the other areas as well. So definitely is a big theme. And I think just with the way our Western world operates, depending on kind of where you are in the world, that is heavily impacting us as well. And so we need to learn how to manage these things to improve our quality of life. So I just want to go through kind of some signs that you could be experiencing burnout. Me personally, I've always felt like it's this, a lot of fatigue, tiredness, exhaustion, just no motivation. You might feel like you're kind of lacking passion or enthusiasm for things, where you're just so tired, and even the things that you typically and normally would enjoy, they just don't do it anymore, right? You're kind of just really burnt out. And so again, you might have this feeling of overwhelm, feeling emotionally drained. You could have some physical symptoms, you might not be sleeping well, or you could be sleeping a lot. You might also notice you've got headaches or digestive issues. You might notice a lot of tension just in your, especially neck and shoulders and your spine. But also just tension in general, in your body. You might have more physical symptoms just be popping up for you during those time periods. I've had people have a lot of random things that seem to show up or manifest when they're dealing with stress or overwhelm or burnout. Again, you might have this loss of passion, or just feeling things and activities that you used to enjoy just aren't the same anymore. You're just feeling, again, uninspired, unmotivated. They're just not cutting it anymore, that sort of thing. You might feel this pressure as well. You're behind, you have so much to do. The to-do list is the longest it's ever been. And at the same time, you have all of this pressure and all of this feeling to do things, but you also are feeling like you can't focus on your tasks. You're having a hard time making decisions. You're having a hard time like getting things done. And so you just kind of consistently feel like you are falling behind, right, in certain areas. So those are kind of the ways that it can show up. These are the ways that it can feel. And it can be really hard to get ourselves out of this cycle because it's not just one thing typically. And what I mean by that is like, it could be your job that's maybe burning you out, but then there's like the financial side of things. So it's like, well, I can't just quit because I have this, right? Responsibilities, all that sort of thing start to like come up, right? And so it can be very challenging for us to find ways to move through this, but we're going to talk about ways that you can start to reclaim some of that energy and get some of your energy back. So the first kind of point that I want to talk about is just kind of like how we can start to notice where our energy is leaking. Again, I'm a person who has experienced burnout, and a lot of times it's like, you're doing shit you don't need to do, in more or less terms. So usually what's happening, obviously with burnout, what's happening is we're extending more than we have from an energy perspective. So we're putting out more energy than we have within us. And we have to start identifying where our energy is going and what we can eventually then start to eliminate, what we can start to cut off. And so there's big areas that we have that are kind of taking our energy. One is obviously work. A lot of people feel this. Others can be certain relationships that we have in our life that are maybe more draining and they're not giving us life, right? Like, because some people are just, nicer and better to be around than some other energies. We also have just like our day-to-day responsibilities and tasks, right? Like our laundry and cleaning the kitchen and getting groceries and like all of those other things that we have to do outside of relationships and work and other things. And then the last one is emotions, and these are like emotional drains that show up because we're in the energy. So certain emotions playing a role or driving our actions. And this comes into a big piece of like boundaries and why we sign up to do things. Are we trying to impress people? Do we not want to let people down? We're worried about what that person's going to think, right? Like, what's the emotional driver as to why we maybe don't have great boundaries or we have a hard time saying no in the first place? And so identifying what is going on, and you can take a look at this too, and it's like, am I doing things in an efficient way? Am I is there a better way that I can be doing this, right? Like, can I manage my time better? Can I spend less time scrolling on social media and do this over here? Or maybe I'm spending too much time or giving myself too much space, and I need to create little blocks of time where it's like I shut my phone off and I don't let that distract me and I like focus on things. Nervous system regulation, by the way, is going to come into this huge when it comes to burnout and to help you kind of like get back on track. So that's a big side note as well. So the second piece of this, like I said, is creating this boundary. So once we know where our energy is going, we can start to say no to certain things. We can start to understand that that's draining me and I either need to let it go or I need to minimize how much time I'm spending in those areas or with those people or whatever. And so saying no can be very hard though, especially when you have to say no to people who are maybe like around you all the time, or you're in person versus like on the phone or text, right? And so, but I feel like most of you probably know this feeling because I have had this, and it's like when you want to say no and you don't, oh my gosh. First of all, that just drags on, and like you are just like dreading things, and sometimes for weeks because it's coming, right? But on the flip side, when you say no, oh my gosh, the relief that you get where you're like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that. Like, you know, it's hard to do and set the boundary, but when you do it, oh my gosh, it is like the best feeling in the world. And I'm also a very introverted person, so sometimes it's like canceling plans and stuff like that when you just really don't feel like going out. It feels so good. It's so good. And so there's a huge, powerful piece to that. And I literally have felt like, oh my gosh, like a weight is lifted off of me, right? But there's sometimes the fear of like, what's that person going to think? What are they going to say? Am I going to disappoint them, right? Like all of those things can start to creep up as to why we don't want to say no in the first place, right? And we need to remember that saying no isn't selfish. It's just something that we need, right? And which is something that we need right now. And I love this saying, people always say, or it comes from somewhere, I'm not sure where, but the people who have the hardest time with your boundaries are the ones that are crossing them the most, right? And so they're the ones taking advantage of you not having boundaries. And when you start to say no, if people have a hard time with that, you're going to know right away that this is the person that's draining me, right? Or this is the situation that's draining me. It's the same thing with work. Like if work is always demanding things of you and you decide to be like, you know what, this isn't in my contract or blah, 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 or you start to kind of pull yourself back because you're overextending yourself, then, you know, usually they're going to be like, well, what the heck? Or they're, you know what I mean? Like there's going to be a little bit of pushback if they're overstepping their boundaries, or they're going to respect the boundary. And so we need to remember that setting boundaries is for us, and it's a form of self-care. It's the strongest form, I think, of self-care. It shows your standard, it shows you're respecting your own worth, your own time, your own energy, and just respecting yourself in general. And it's you not settling for less or settling for letting someone else control the way that you want to be and the way you want to live. So some things that you can start with, small boundaries. Obviously, there's going to be some boundaries that are harder to set than others. I think a big one that we can because again, I've talked about this before, but boundaries is also setting them with ourselves. And so maybe start with just setting boundaries for yourself. Like, I'm going to not look at my phone for an hour before bed or something like that, right? Like start to, and do things that are supportive for your nervous system, like the phone not being around an hour before bed. That would be a good way to just start small. And also just anything that you don't literally have the capacity for, you literally can't take on, stop taking those things on as best as you can. So yeah, definitely I would say like working with, I just have my notes and stuff, so just to kind of keep me on track here. But anything that's not essential, we can let those things go, right? We can start to say like, you know what, I don't have the capacity for this right now. I'd love to, but I can't take this on. You know, could we schedule a different time? Or can I let you know when I have space, when I have time? I'll get back to you and look at my schedule and see what's going on, right? Like just little things, again, spacing things out and not taking on more than we can chew. So, now the third piece is this nervous system component, which looking after our restorative practices or doing restorative practices and making sure that we're making rest a priority, especially, I mean, rest should always be a priority. Some people would probably argue that, but rest should always be a priority because you can't keep going if you don't rest, right? Like you can't keep driving a car that has no gas. So we need to make sure we're always filling up our gas tank. And especially when we're already in a state of burnout, rest needs to be like almost like priority number one. Like it needs to be a really big focus for what we're working towards. And this is going to help us recharge. It's also going to give us a little bit of life back. And again, we can start to incorporate some of these things when we have those boundaries in place, or we create a little bit of space and time, or set boundaries with ourselves to create that space and time to be able to do them. So these sorts of things are any of your nervous system, emotional regulation practices, your breath work, your meditation, any gentle practices are going to be really good for burnout because you may or may not have the energy for like full-blown exercise, like, you know, a HIIT workout or something crazy, going for like a 10K run. So you might be better off with like, you know, a slow-paced yoga, stretching, Pilates, or even like walking. I had mentioned anything that's like movement, but it's just on a slower pace is going to be really supportive. And sleep is huge. Sleep can take a little bit. Again, I suggest doing some of these other practices to support yourself so that you are finding that your sleep is getting better. These breath work and meditation, those sorts of things are really good to do before bed because they can help us down regulate. Not being on your phone an hour before you go to bed is a great tool as well, or screens, right? So creating a little bit of a routine before you go into bed is going to teach your body, okay, we're starting to wind down. We're starting to get ready to sleep. And you can start to teach your body kind of what you're about to go into based on the tools and the things that you're doing. One thing I really like to do is before I go to bed is even just like, even if I'm watching a show or I'm on my phone, even though I shouldn't be, even if it's like an hour or two even before I'm going to sleep, I'll just like turn some of the lights off to kind of just create like a darker vibe. And that just, again, helps me like slow down. I'm getting tired. It's darker, right? It's obviously easier when it's dark outside too, because your house is typically darker, but you know, shut off some of the lights around the house if you don't do that already. The fourth thing I want to talk about is aligning with what's most important to you. So this does come into the boundary piece, but it's also like knowing what's important to you, of like where you are spending your time. So burnout can happen because we are doing too many of the things that don't fill us up, or they're not the things we want to be doing, and we're not doing enough of the things that we do want to do. I had this, I'm just trying to think of how I can like tell this story without getting into too much crazy detail, but I had this a little bit showing up for me and in my life a couple months ago where I just like wasn't taking enough time for myself. It's not like I really wanted to do anything specific other than like rest, but and you know, watch my shows, and you know, again, rest and what we want to do with our life is totally subjective, so you know, take everything grain of salt. It's more of just like an example. But what I was finding I was doing is I was going and doing a lot of things that other people wanted me to do, or staying, you know, with people or social situations longer than I needed to, and then I was like not having enough time for myself at the end of the week, you know, between work and, you know, relationships and family and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I just needed to take more space and time for myself, and that in itself was so healing. And I feel like even just me acknowledging that and then taking the space and the time when I needed it, I'm almost finding now I need less space. And I think it's just because I was just so depleted that I needed to like get some recharging happening. And so I've been really focusing on giving myself some time, more time over the weekend to just like be by myself. I very much like my alone time. So for me, that was a big thing where that's what I needed. I mean, you might need something different, but for me, I was like, I need some downtime. I need some time where I'm not expected to go and do and have all these things and like associate and socialize with these people, like, you know what I mean? So I just needed to be able to pull my energy back because I had to put a boundary, right? I had to put a boundary for myself because there were no boundaries in the other space that I was in for me. So that was where I had to align with, what do I want to do, right? Some of us literally, especially if you're parents, you'll probably find that, you know, you're doing a lot of things for your kids or your spouse or whoever, and then you just don't have that time and energy for you. And so again, it could be the alone time. It could be, you know, something that you literally want to go do, a book you want to read, right? A bath you want to have. It could be anything. But what is it that you want to do, and how can we start to incorporate some of these things daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, right? Like how can we start to incorporate these things so we feel like we're prioritizing ourselves? So even just like, even at the beginning of your week, or now, you can just reflect on like, what's a non-negotiable of what I want to be able to do in a week, or what do I want to do in a month? Or maybe it's going for a massage once a month. Maybe it's going for a walk every day. What are the things that you know you need to do for yourself that is something that aligns you, and it's what you want to do, it makes you feel good, and it gives you energy. And what would you maybe be disappointed on if you didn't incorporate, right? So if you went, we're going to enter 2025. So if we went all of 2025, where you didn't have this thing or you didn't get to do it, what would you regret, or would you regret it? And is there anything you would regret if you didn't include it? So you could kind of play around with that. But it's things that we want to make us feel like fulfilled. They feel like it's lighting us up. Maybe it's a course you want to take, maybe it's a class, or maybe it's crafts you want to do, or like whatever the thing is, socializing with friends, right? Like whatever the thing is, we just need to know what those things are and then start to incorporate them and maybe even plan them out so that they're already in our schedule. And the last part is understanding that you don't end up in burnout overnight, which means it can take some time to get out of it. Burnout we need to look at things like long-term for our life. And so the things that we do daily start to compound, either good or bad. And burnout is one of those things that the energy depletion starts to compound, and we're giving. And again, nobody's filling back up the gas tank, and now we have no gas and the car's not moving. So we need to remember that we need to fill up the gas tank along the way. And so we have to take these pit stops. We have to take these breaks to be able to, again, stay fueled, stay charged, so that we can keep going through life. And so we may go through ebbs and flows where we have a little bit more space than other times in our life, and that is just life in itself. That's where I always say tools are supportive when, on the, kind of daily highs and lows. But at the end of it, it is also lifestyle, and what are we doing and how do we want to live? And when we can start to shift what we're doing into a place of more alignment with ourselves, we are going to feel more fulfilled, and we're not going to feel as depleted because we're not giving away so much of our energy, and we're doing things that give energy back. So you can do all the things that you're doing now as long as you're also giving to yourself. And I think the big question is, can you do both? If you can do both, perfect. If you cannot do both, that's where the struggle typically is, and that's where something's got to give. And we shouldn't be giving more away than what we have. And unfortunately, a lot of us do that, where we give more and we have less energy, and all we do is we give and we give and we give, and we then end up not having enough for ourselves. And so that's the biggest piece with burnout, is that you just have been neglecting what you need for you. And so to take that time back very slowly, right? Step by step, day by day, and checking in with yourself and noticing how you're feeling is going to be big. So again, kind of going back to the beginning of what I was saying, of just how you can feel and what you've been noticing in your body or how you're feeling is a big sign of, am I burnt out or am I not? And how well am I doing on my energy scales is how I am doing mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, right? And so making regular check-ins with yourself, making sure that you are resting and playing and enjoying life, doing things that feel good for you, making sure that you're nourishing your body by eating good foods, getting good sleep, moving your body, being around good people, and making sure that you're doing things that are just fulfilling you and lighting you up and are your interests and your passions, no matter how weird or crazy or wild they might be, right? We need to make sure that we're living our lives in a way that is supportive for us, and it's going to look different for each person. So that's where I find sometimes in my life, what I've noticed is that burnout happens because I'm living life a way that people think I should be living, and I'm not being authentic to myself because my version of life looks very different for them. And then there's all these like fears and these doubts and these worries and these thoughts that people are going to judge me, think whatever of me, or I have to keep up, right? Or people are going to be disappointed, or whatever the thing is. But when we want our life to look different than what other people do, that's when it gets really hard to set the boundaries, to say no, to prioritize ourselves, because it can feel like we're separating ourselves from those people. And as humans, we want connection, right? So that's the tidbit on burnout. Burnout is, like I said, a huge piece. Again, it does start with nervous system regulation, and boundaries are like number one priority for anyone dealing with burnout. So if you are, definitely take a look at those things. If you want any support, feel free to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on Instagram if you have any questions. I do also have my breakthrough sessions, which you can check out, which are great for people who are feeling this way, to kind of get a short little snippet with me, see some areas that this is showing up, and give you some more tailored, specific, personalized things that you can start to do. Obviously, this is more generalized because we're talking to everybody. But yeah, a breakthrough session is going to obviously be one-on-one, and I can be supportive for you in creating kind of the changes that you need to make. Or as well, I also have my Elevate Her program, which is my coaching 12-week program. And this is where we walk through for 12 weeks, like working towards changing these sorts of things and getting you on track, getting you in alignment, getting your body, your mind feeling good, and getting things emotionally, feeling good, and just you feeling like you're on the right path and you're doing the right things, and you're able to make these like final changes for yourself, and make changes in general for yourself. And so if you're feeling burnt out, it's not the end, but you do have to make some changes. But the biggest thing is just be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, give yourself time and space to rest, and remember that the people or the situations that are taking advantage of you and your energy are the ones that are not going to be happy with it, and those are probably the ones that you should let go, right? Like they needed the boundaries the most. So, and as much as that's hard, it can be sometimes the most rewarding because it gives you the biggest kind of result, right? But yeah, let me know if you've struggled with any of those things, boundaries, regulating yourself, just stress and tired and overwhelm, burnt out. Let me know how that is. And if you've done anything to help yourself gain your energy back, you can definitely, if you're on YouTube, you can comment that down below. I'd love to hear from you guys of what you've been doing in your own practices and how you've been supporting yourself and what you've even found is working and not working, because that can help, other people who are listening and watching these as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. It's lovely as always. There won't be a podcast next week because it's Christmas, but I do plan on having one coming out on January 1st, which is a Wednesday. So yeah, you'll get one 2025. We'll be right back at it. But yeah, we will be talking about some more things. So if you guys, I will be posting more frequently with these types of things on my Instagram. So if you guys want to follow me there, then feel free to check me out on Instagram. The link for that is in the description of this episode. And other than that, I think that's all. So I hope you guys have a wonderful holidays, and I will see you guys in the new year. Bye.